Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. We are here for a very exciting interview. I'm here with Jay Wasley. He's the founder of Simple Equations Media and Discovery Channel's longest running and most watched program in their network history. Some of you may know it as Ghost Adventures. It's a very popular show. There's also, it's created by Zak Bagans, who also has a museum right around this building. Like, it's literally walking distance from here. So I'm excited to talk to an entrepreneur who's found an enormous amount of success out here in Vegas. So thank you for coming on, Jay.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This is cool.
I appreciate it. When did you come out to Vegas?
It was about 3-4ish years ago now. So it's still kind of early, I guess, overall. But I was coming out here all the time anyway for the show, because the other guys in the show were all based out of here. And I originally started on the East Coast, like Philadelphia area, and then got to Nashville, and then from Nashville over to Vegas. It was kind of a slow move my way across the country a little bit at a time.
Seems to always be the case. The majority of people who end up moving out here always say they're just trying to escape the freezing cold weather or the wind.
Right. Yeah, it was cold on the East Coast, and then it was the humidity in Nashville.
So how did you, obviously you have a lot of success. Ghost Adventures as it's on like season 16 now, 17, something like that.
More. We kind of lost track a while ago. I know. I've been with the show 11 years now, which is insane and wild. And I think on Discovery Plus, they're labeling the new season currently as 24. So I think, I'm not sure, there was like weird, that's why we get confused, because there were some seasons that they grouped together, other ones they split up. But I guess they're calling it 24 now.
I guess for you guys, as you film, to you, it's like it doesn't even come in seasons because you're just probably bulk recording or going out on the road as is, and then the Discovery Channel breaks it up to seasons to market it.
We basically film nonstop. So like basic normal production TV shows tend to shoot an entire season in one chunk. Like you'll go out, you'll shoot for about 3 months straight, and then you're off for the rest of the year. So we've basically done it differently, where we shoot every other week consistently with me for the last 11 years, literally every other week doing an episode.
And from my understanding, you came into the show a few seasons into its recording history, correct?
Yep. Yeah, the show started, it was running a little bit for a couple years, and then I was working out of Philadelphia at the time and doing a lot of reality shows, a camera guy, sound guy, things like that. And the show used to hire a local sound guy wherever they would go to. So, it was kind of a new show at the time. But once it got going and it was getting more successful, they decided they wanted to bring a full-time sound guy on. Because a lot of times, on the show, we're out in the middle of nowhere or some half-abandoned town in the desert, So there's not really a whole lot of, production professionals necessary to always draw to. So they got to a point where they're like, all right, let's bring on a full-time sound guy. And I was doing a show out in Philly at the time, and the production company was also the production company that handles all the logistics and everything for Ghost Adventures. And they were like, hey, do you want to actually fly out to Vegas? And, so I was like, all right, it was just a gig at first to me. It was just like, all right, another sound job, done plenty of these, and flew out to Vegas, drove out to Goldfield, which is insane, and kind of like never saw that kind of place before, which was amazing. And, everybody was great, but still. And then I went home and kind of just felt like a gig at first, but everyone was really cool. And then I remember when I watched the show come out, it was the first time where I was like, wow, like that's true to what happened. A lot of reality TV, a lot of production, it's, they twist things or they create drama. You think of like the typical reality shows, but like, it was like, I was impressed how realistic and how accurate it was to what happened. And then I realized like, it's not so much just a reality. Like, yeah, I guess it is. We're doing what we do, but it's a documentary, so it's kind of like I don't want to say I hate, but I don't like how it's just, oh, it's a reality show. It's like, no, I think of us as like a docu-reality series, because we're more trying to tell these stories and tell the history and then, experience it ourselves. But yeah, so it just kept going, and I just kept being the sound guy. They kept bringing me back every other week, and it, and over time, probably about a year in or so, being on the road all the time, we became good friends. We don't have a big crew. Still to this day, we don't have a big crew. Everything's kind of, done. Everyone does multiple jobs, wears multiple hats. And after a while, it got to a point where we're good friends. And I remember we just got back from Jamaica, and we filmed at Johnny Cash's house in Jamaica, which was insane because it's left exactly as it was when, unfortunately he came back to Tennessee and he died. And it's like, there's clothes in the closet, his shoes are by the door, things like that. It's still exactly the way it is. And the next shoot, we were in Arizona driving, and Zak's like, hey, Jay, like, because I wasn't investigating, I was just doing sound, and then they would investigate, I would go home. And we were in Arizona, we're driving to location. He's like, hey, we got this EVP, which is electronic voice phenomena, where you record and a voice suddenly appears in the silence. And he's like, check this out. Like, what you think? And you hear Zak say, do you like Johnny Cash's music? And you hear, yeah, like real deep, And I was like, holy shit, that sounds like Johnny Cash. He's like, yeah, right. He's like, do you think it is? And I was like, oh, you could actually do an analysis where you could take a sample of Johnny Cash's voice and compare it to that and kind of like check out the waveforms and the frequency range and things like that. And you can kind of, compare it. And he's like, you can do that. And I'm like, yeah, like I'm a tech guy. That's, kind of what I do. And, I nerd out on that kind of stuff. And he's like, all right, well, you do that on camera. So that was my first kind of appearance brought into the show, is doing that. And then from there, it was kind of like, every couple episodes I'll be brought in to do the same kind of thing, like do a little experiment or do some kind of special analysis, things like that. So then I kind of grew more in front of the camera. And then it just kind of kept evolving from there. And then more and more I became, regular. I became kind of the nerve center guy, which, if you haven't watched the show, when we investigate, I'll put cameras all over the location with robotic heads, and it all comes back to a control center where I'll sit and I can, look around and I can walk you to the guys and be like, hey, there's something moved here. I heard a sound there. Go check that out. And then that kind of became my main part of the show. And then about 6-7 years ago now, it's so the time frame, it's just, it all blurs together. I stepped up more and became one of the cinematographers of the show and became more kind of, official opening title cast member. So.
Yeah, it's a general story of kind of working your way up in a business, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's like the ethos of Vegas. Is a lot of these CEOs who run the hotels started as like line cooks and chefs, and it's the same way for you. You came in as a sound engineer, and now you're a regular cast member. And I like that they show you as the control center, because for something like Ghost Adventures, most reality shows receive a lot of criticism because they don't know what's going on in the back.
Right.
But if they show you and you're the person who can explain some of these technologies and the reasons why things are happening, it brings a little bit more transparency to what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and I think we try to aim for credibility, and even when something happens, we don't always just say, oh, it's just a ghost. Like, we'll try to explain it. We'll look at different camera angles and be like, oh, was it this? Could it have been this? And a lot of the times we call it debunking, where we'll discover like, oh, it was just caused by this, and we'll tell you. Or other times, plenty of times, we have no idea what it was, and it's unexplainable.
Were you a believer in paranormal phenomena before you came onto the show?
I was, yeah, actually. Like, even growing up as a kid, I grew up in South Jersey, so I grew up with like legends of like the Jersey Devil and things like that, and I was always into it. And I was kind of I was a weird kid. I was like into just learning. I was like a thirsty for knowledge, and I wasn't brought up religious or anything, but I kind of studied religions. I studied different beliefs, not just one particular one, but kind of all different ones, and kind of was just like, trying to make sense of the world, I guess, and just had this natural curiosity to what it all is and what is after all this, and, kind of like that. So I was always into it, played with a lot of Ouija boards, things like that, and just had crazy experiences. And then as you get older, real life kicks in, and you kind of stray away from that, and you got to work, you got to pay the bills, and you do all that kind of stuff. And then, so it was kind of weird. We always talk about it on the show with the guys, like how there's like we feel like there's a big reason why like the four of us have gotten together. Like, it feels like it was, I don't want to say divine intervention, but there's like some bigger thing that kind of brought us all together, because we all have like different walks of life and different expertise, different things. And we all just came together, and it just works. It's wild.
It's a perfect match made in heaven. Yeah. The ghost phenomena is interesting to me. For one, I'm a believer in some sort of extraterrestrial life out there for aliens. On this planet, I'm a little bit more critical, just because the proof is, I haven't seen personal proof, but although watching shows, it makes me think differently, because you never know. I've had on a psychic medium on the show who's talked about her experiences. And so it's hard to disprove, But with some of these new technologies that you guys are using, it makes me think a little bit different. Like maybe it is true, or is it staged, or like what the case is. How do you explain some of like creating some of these paranormal technologies and implementing them into the show?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is stuff that already exists. Like one of them, for example, is the SLS camera, which I love that, which it stands for Structure Light Sensor. Not to go too depth, but basically what it does, it shoots out a grid of infrared lasers and it maps out a room. And it's programmed to know the human body. Like it, it's like we all have like measurements, we all have symmetry, you can program a device to recognize that. And we'll shoot it in a room and there'll be nothing. And then we'll, for example, say, hey, is anyone here? And then a figure will appear and it maps it out as a stick figure. And so it's mapping that there's a human form there where we can see that there's nothing there. And for the last 20 minutes, there's been nothing there. So it's like something is there, and then on top of that I can explain, that kind of makes sense in a scientific way, even in the paranormal ghosts. Like I believe in energy. I believe that you and I, every living thing has an energy source. And we know that, like that's measurable, and then it makes sense that when we die, a bit of our energy could still kind of linger around, and under the right circumstances, the right variables, you're able to pick up some of that on different cameras that see different spectrums, things like that. So that makes sense to me. And if you walk down the same hallway every day of your life, it makes sense. A little bit of your energy is still roaming back and forth there. The thing that blows my mind still to this day is like when we get that stick figure and we say, hey, can you say hello? And it raises its hand and waves to us. That's when it still blows my mind, because now it's not just like an energy residual loop or something. It's actually intelligent. It's actually aware of us and we're aware of it, and it's communicating with us. So that still blows my mind. And, like you said, and I still try to approach everything skeptically. I don't just jump instantly to be like, oh, it's a ghost. Sometimes it might even be like, oh, maybe it could have been an alien, who knows? But, just having the ability to explore this stuff, I truly love it. And, we keep trying, we keep pushing new technologies. We're always trying to figure out what else we can use. And the SLS, like I was to kind of backtrack, originally started from a Kinect, from the Xbox Kinect. We actually used an Xbox. I forget who it was. Maybe it was Aaron or somebody. Realized that when you turn on your Xbox, this is like the old Xbox, and you turn it on, you can configure your Xbox camera, and it goes into this mode where it kind of maps the room, and you see yourself as a stick figure, and it's like, okay, I'm all in the camera, like I'm good to play the game. So we realized, we're like, oh, that's cool. So we actually started bringing an Xbox out on location and plug it in and set it up, and we started getting figures that would appear. And then, we started working with this electrical engineer up in Colorado, Bill Chappell, who's like paranormal mad scientist. He's a genius, and he actually then made it a compact, kind of made his own version of it.
Interesting. Do you think ghosts, I guess this would be from your own personal belief, do you believe ghosts are some sort of trapped entity, maybe of a sort, or maybe my personal opinion of ghosts that I had thought of when I was in high school is I always said that ghosts were people from the future traveling into the past, and it was kind of like the remnants of their energies.
Yeah, that's what I've always thought. I mean, not to go too off topic, but that's what I always thought aliens are actually humans from the future that are traveling back. We can get into that in a whole other realm, but I think that is. I think a lot of it. There was a case we did at the original house that inspired the Conjuring movies. And I remember talking to the family member who, when she lived there as a child, and she was the one that saw this all happen to her mom and her parents. And then the Warrens came in and investigated, and she was a child during all this. And she told us that her mother was the one that was mostly affected. And her mother would see life playing out, but from 50 years ago, and I think that is there's no one solid answer. There's no one right answer, but I have tons of theories, and I'm never one to be like, this is it. This is the way it is. But I feel, time in itself is really a man-made thing. We've created the clock. We've created time, a measurement of time, and then there's a whole belief, and you can get into quantum mechanics of how everything that has happened and will happen and is happening is all happening at the same time. So in a sense, when we do investigate and we, capture things. It could almost be not necessarily time travel, but somehow we're able to see through into that other time period or dimension or whatever it is. I don't know exactly, but I think sometimes it can kind of loosely be related to time travel in a sense.
I agree. I've had these type of conversations so many times because I love talking about existentialism, just because of this plane. I grew up Jewish, I identify as being Jewish, but I was never one to really believe in the specifics of the religion, right? To me, it seemed like falsehoods, but I am a firm believer in consciousness. And I think there's something that consciousness has to play with, either ghosts or spirits or paranormal activity or anything like that. Because the thing with consciousness is in order to be self-aware, in order to understand what self-aware is, you have to be self-aware. So it's almost like this paradox, but it's like consciousness is like a fabric of reality that we just haven't been able to, either our minds can't comprehend exactly what it is because there's some sort of artificial boundary surrounding it. And so we use some of these tools or this scientific reasoning like philosophy and epistemology to try to understand what these different things are.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard too to analyze the consciousness because we are in a conscious state. It's sometimes you can't see, right now, I'm looking at you, I can't see my face, I can't see what's going on here. You know what I mean? My perception is only this way. So for us to analyze what's going on inside here, I feel like in a plane of reality, we're not in a perspective view where we can actually truly see that and measure that. And, I don't know what the answer is. Maybe when we die, we do, you leave your body and you could step back and view it in a different light, in a different angle, and you can kind of maybe make more sense of it. Or, I'm not promoting it, but people at shamans and things that use hallucinogenics and travel to spiritual realms and things like that kind of break away from their consciousness, break away from this state, and you kind of view things from a different view.
Yeah. The idea that I presented earlier about ghosts being people from the future traveling to the past, I actually had that epiphany my first time experimenting with psilocybin.
Okay, yeah.
And I've experimented with a few different psychedelics, LSD and DMT and things like that. And it seems like there's something there. I mean, I know these kind of psychedelics, they kind of scramble your neurons and your brain patterns. But the thing that I can't get past is so many people have the same experiences, especially when it comes to dimethyltryptamine, which makes me think that there's 100%, I guess we'll say 99.99% that there's something else out there.
Right. Well, with that, it's interesting because we all have it in our brain. We all create dimethyltryptamine, and, I've read things and seen things where they talk about that is actually what makes our consciousness. Once that's released in the womb, that's when our consciousness begins. And, in a way you could write it off as this is all just a big hallucination in a way.
Right.
And, when you kind of think of it, it kind of is in a way because, what we know of reality, what we know of matter is light waves and energy, things like that. If we could see this world not the way our eyes and brain process it, it's just waves and light beams and this bottle of water doesn't really look like this. This table isn't really like this, and everything is spacious too. This seems solid, but technically nothing's actually touching. It's all, there's space between the molecules, So, but our brains, our eyes, our things process it to make sense. For some reason, I don't know why, maybe it's the dimethyltryptamine, but our brains have developed, this way to take in all of this, stimulus, through our five senses and make it make sense in a way, but we know that's not really what it all is, but we accept that as our reality, and that's the world we live in.
Do you think some of these spiritual entities that you come across could possibly possess dimethyltryptamine, because we acknowledge that they were intelligent, right? Because they're reacting to different things that you propose to them.
Right.
So it makes me think otherwise that they're this perilous soulless figure just stuck in this routine, because they're actually responding to you guys, which means they have to possess something to interact with you.
It could be just the consciousness without the body, and if it is, the science behind it. I don't know how it could all work, but if we know we have a body and we have a consciousness. So like if the body dies, maybe the consciousness does linger and somehow it's able to still reach across, and it's obviously weaker. And I think too, just like I was saying, our brains process things to make sense. Our brains always want to make things make sense. So I think a lot of people that are like, oh, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe it at all. Chances are they're never going to experience it because they're shut off to it. And I think you do kind of have to have an open mind. You have to be, open to the possibility that it could exist. And then I think once you do that, it kind of triggers your brain a little bit to kind of be like, okay, now we can let in these other, bits of things, or we're not just going to change it or hide it, or, so this world makes sense to us.
From the shows that I have watched, I'm not a big TV watcher, but I did watch like 7 or 8 episodes in preparation for this. Cool. It seemed like most of your adventures pertain down to like older, like more historical areas. Do you ever set up in like newly established buildings?
Yeah. We actually did a case, I forget when, a couple of years ago, and it was actually kind of tough. It was in a private home, and it was a newer house. But the thing was it was like a family, and the son, was a big Ghost Adventures fan. It was a tough emotional one, and he committed suicide in the house. And, we knew this happened. We didn't really know the time frame. The mother was claiming, all these things started happening, and she was afraid that something was, caused him to do that. And, it goes back even further than just the suicide. So we got there and we're talking. We learned that the suicide was literally a couple months ago. Like it was so fresh and so new that, it was kind of a different vibe to it. But I feel like we made connection. We made connection to this, in a sense, newer deceased person. So that was definitely interesting. I don't know. And I don't know if it's like the way our society is today, where like, I think, obviously with our show and other shows, things like the conversations, you can talk about it now. Mm-hmm. I hear about people all the time. They're like, oh, I've had paranormal experiences my whole life, but I can never talk about it. And friends make fun of me, family makes fun of me, but now I, watch these shows and it gives me the, comfort that I could talk about it, which is great. But I feel still as a society, we're kind of shut down to that stuff. We kind of were like, nah, we don't want to believe it. We don't want to look that way, and I think if you're like that and you die, you might not, like, even though your consciousness might be lingering around, you might not even be aware that, you could be a ghost, if that's what we want to call it, because you just don't believe it. You're not following that, you believe what you're told, maybe you go to heaven or you go to hell or you just lay in the ground, whatever it is, you're not believing it. So when you do die, you're not going to participate in, the ghost afterlife, if you will. But back in the day, I think people were more open to it. They weren't so, overrun by technology and social media and kind of like numbing of the brain. You know what I mean? They were kind of more in connection with spirituality and the earth and things like that. So I feel like, maybe that's a reason why, older hauntings tend to be more active and more, because they weren't so shut down. So they're able to keep doing it.
That was one of my big questions. Maybe because it's more quiet surrounding those historical areas too, that these spiritual entities, I don't know, are maybe more self-aware, or like, I know in we're talking about planes and things that we don't see, like the magnetic fields that surround us and some of these other different fields that we can't see, could prevent some of these spirits from, I don't know, walking around or becoming apparitions where you could see them actually in person.
And two, maybe they do, but because we're still living in the modern world, we don't notice modern ghosts because it's just blending in. But, you'll notice someone in an 1800s outfit or something like that, that's going to stick out more, you know what I mean? So there could even be that. You can look at it that way, that, and two, in a way, like, honestly, the cooler stuff is the ancient history, the old history, I know we've gotten to do some episodes over in Europe, and just, it's crazy when we think of like a building here that's old, not necessarily even in Vegas, old as 10 years here, but, in America, we're like, oh, that house is 100 years old. And like, which, yeah, that's old, but you go to Europe and there's things that are thousands of years old and things like that. And, just that energy of history there. Like, and I think that's the thing too. I think the amount of time, the amount of history, the amount of energy that's been put out in that building, in that location, dates back hundreds of years, thousands of years. This place, you said was kind of recently built. So it's not stained with energy as much, in a way. Maybe some of the ground is certain spots, but like the building itself is fairly new, so it doesn't hold on to that. There's a whole thing called the stone tape theory where, like actual organic surfaces like stone and wood and things like that can actually hold on to energy and possibly consciousness energy.
Have you guys ever come across cases where ghosts have migrated from their original place where they were originally found or were known for and then migrated to a different area to disturb others?
Yeah. I feel like we've encountered, we've like touched on like stories in one location and then we're at a different location and then there's like a crossover with the story where like, oh, history, this person traveled here, and we'll get evidence that person might be there. I'm not one to believe, I think it was an American Horror Story, The Murder House, first season, where like they died in the house, they're trapped. Like that's the only, I think you have the ability to move, and I think a lot of it comes to with your consciousness, what you're aware of. I think some people, if you believe like, oh, I'm going to die and that's where I die and I'm stuck there, maybe you will kind of be stuck there. Like you have your own mental block stopping you from moving outward, where other people, there's a whole theory of like, oh, you go to where you loved, like, all right, well, where did I find happiness, or where was like a place I really enjoyed being? Like, you kind of, your energy might flow to there, or somewhere you visited all the time, it might be there, or you might even, energy might split up. It might not even be, like that's the only, I die and you're communicating with my spirit might be in my house, but it also might be in my parents' house where I grew up in New Jersey. It might also be over in England where I visited my family, like things like that. It could, because we don't have the physical body anymore to kind of place us in one point, our consciousness, I think, has the ability to expand outward, to go kind of wherever. And, and it goes into the theory of even, people that are living that do, like outer body experiences and astral traveling, things like that, how like your body can stay put, but your mind can actually, travel outward.
Interesting. So what is the overall goal of the Ghost Adventures team? Is it to just show that these entities exist? Is it to communicate with them? Is it to assist them in some sort of way? Like, how do the goals vary from episode to episode?
Yeah, I think they do vary. I mean, each case we approach independently, and I think some cases we do that are more, we're trying to help somebody, especially if it's a private home or a business, things like that are having trouble, that are, there's some kind of entity or spirit that's attacking people or, repressing people or causing harm. Like, we'll approach those with the idea of trying to help, offer cleansing, or, if they're religious, we can bring in exorcism, exorcists, things like that. Like whatever it needs to be to cleanse and help, we'll approach it that way. And then other times it's just an old, scary, creepy building and we just want to experience it and document it. And, we always want that holy grail piece of evidence that, without a, because there's always doubters, there's always people that question it, but like we always kind of want to strive for like that one piece that are like, yep, say something now.
The
like,
smoking gun.
Exactly. And it's weird because like we feel like we've gotten that, and I think that's when it kind of plays into, I guess, the downfall of it being on TV is that no matter what you do, there's always going to be people that still question it. So I think like we've kind of shifted over the years that like we believe it, we know it, and we live it. Like it's not just a show, it's not just work we do. Like we come home, this affects our personal lives at times. Like we're all best friends, we all talk all the time. Like we'll talk after filming, and the week in between, we're like, oh my God, this just happened. This is happening at my house, or and there's a lot of stuff that happens that's not on camera. It's like what you see is kind of just a highlight reel of what happened while we were out there. But there's just so much more, and I don't know. It's just
yeah. I'm sure there's, for the majority of the time while you guys out there adventuring, we'll call it, there's probably a lot of downtime or a lot of time where you're not actually interacting with them, where you're just trying to experiment it. But on the TV show, because it has to be compact into 30 minutes or an hour, or whatever your time selection is, it seems fictitious because of the way that it's presented.
Yeah, people will be like, oh, how do you always get evidence? It's like, well, we're there for, we're out on the road for 5 days, we're filming for at least 3 of those days. you're seeing, once you kind of edit it down and you cut, like I think, it's a 40 something minute cut is what you see. And like we literally filmed for hours on 20 plus cameras, there's a lot of footage, and it's like fishing. Sometimes we do sit there and hours go by and nothing's happening. And it's like, we're not going to show you that. Like, that's going to be boring. No one wants to just watch us sit there and walk around and nothing happens. So we, obviously have to show the highlight reel in a sense.
Yeah. Well, one of the main critiques that I saw online wasn't necessarily about the ghost itself. They were critiquing Zak being a little bit like overly characteristic or just kind of accentuating the way that he goes about and yelling and,
right.
Stuff like, is he aware that he embellishes the character a little bit?
I mean, the thing is, that's him. Like, we aren't characters, we are who we are. Like even off camera, like I'm going to go golfing with Zak tomorrow. Like that's who he is. He's passionate, too, which is, I think that's, some people look at things differently, but like, he's a passionate guy. Like he lives this, like he started the museum. Like every day he's living and engulfed in this world, and he's probably one of the most passionate, hardworking people, and that's the thing, people watch, they don't realize what goes into the preparation, what goes into like afterwards and putting it all together, and he's the guy that literally does everything. He's the boss, he's in charge, every creative decision, is his, which is another great thing is that as a TV show, we don't have producers, we don't have the network that's telling us what to do or how to do things, it's literally just us. And like Zak takes the lead and, and like kind of trust in all of us to kind of bring our own things to the table, and we can kind of just try and do whatever we want every time. And, that's literally how we are. Like what you see is what we are.
It's great to hear. Yeah, freedom of expression is really important to show's growth, to your authenticity. But in terms of your growth with the show, as we mentioned, right, you started as the audio guy, and now you're the actual cinematographer. And from what I believe, your company, Simple Equations, actually is the production company for the show?
No, we're not actually the production company for the show. That's a company based out of New York called My Entertainment. But I supply equipment to the show at times. I've brought on some crew members, things like that. So kind of like supplementary assistance to the show, if you will. But yeah, we don't actually produce it.
Okay. How does the back end of the show work? If you could talk about it in terms of like prepping for the show, how do you find the locations, traveling and everything kind of behind the scenes?
So we have some researchers that do work for us that are kind of always gathering things and putting together, little, I guess, packets, if you will, kind of possibilities. But then also fans, we get messages every day from people on social media that say, oh, have you ever heard of this place, or check out this place? So sometimes we see that, and then ultimately, kind of Zak funnels through it all and kind of is like, oh, this place sounds good, has good stories, things like that. It seems like a decent location. We don't want to just do a small little, shack in the middle of the woods. Sometimes, you need some space to work with, and and then that's literally it. Before I go out to the shoot, we'll have a few interviews scheduled. Like we know who we're talking to when we get there, at least the initial first people. That's it. And it's like, okay, we get there and it's literally a free for all. Like we start going, we interview someone, we learn something. We're like, hey, let's go this way now. Let's go check out this, or let's find someone else to talk to and learn more about that. And, that's the creative freedom there that we have. We have that starting point, and then we just kind of go off each episode, whichever way we need to go with it. And then we film that. We film the first half of the show, which is more like the history and the stories, things like that. We do all that, first. And then after that, then it's just the four of us. We get locked in, not always necessarily locked in, but we call it the lockdown, just by ourselves, pitch black all night long. And we spend the entire night there trying to document everything we can. And, we go through that. And like I said, sometimes it's hours of nothing. And then sometimes other times it is just popping off and just nonstop going crazy. And it's like, all right, this is great. And then basically all that footage comes back to Vegas. Billy, who's on the show, he actually goes through, watches every camera, listens to every piece of audio for like a few days after, filming. He'll go through every single thing and he basically bookmarks it all. And it's like, here's the highlights, here's what happened. And then he works with Zak, and then we have an editor that, Zak will work with to kind of be like, these are the pieces we want, let's put that together. And then the other half of the show with like the stories and interviews, that gets edited simultaneously in New York. And then it all kind of comes together and then final edit.
Wow. It's a process.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was kind of expecting it to be a lot more hoops and ladders to that process, just because I've heard working for television stations, there's a lot of politicking and there's a lot of different people, different contests and approvals process and everything like that.
And there usually is, you're right. And that's one thing, like I said, I'm just very thankful our show, we have that full creative freedom. And, Zak's the one that, if what he decides, like, that's what we go with, and obviously he trusts us. He listens to our input and has our opinions and things like that. If there's things questionable, but ultimately, like that, there's no hoops to jump through. There's no like send a cut to the network and then they send back notes and we got to change things, like none of that.
Is there a moment that sticks out to you throughout your entire history on the show that has given you the biggest frightening moment where you're actually like fearful of your life?
Oh yeah. There's been a few, some not even in a spiritual sense, some just in a physical sense. Sometimes we're filming on the side of a mountain, or there's a cliff, or, we're in caves and there's mountain lions in this area, things like that. So like sometimes it's just fearful of that. And then, on another level, there's experiences like where you're in an old big abandoned building and you hear people walking around, you hear people talking. My first instinct is like, all right, there's some homeless crackhead in here and I'm going to turn the corner and he's going to stab me and I'm going to freak out, but then we'll search the place and no one's there, which is then becomes insane on a whole nother level in the spiritual paranormal world. So there's always that fear. But I think one of the things that always like sticks with me, I was in Prescott, Arizona, and we were in this old saloon, and the people that worked there were claiming this evil entity like comes from the basement, like from this crawl space that you can go under the foundation where like the old original saloon was built on. And, they just felt that's where the evil resided. So I went down, I got sent into the crawl space by myself. So I'm crawling through the crawl space on my belly, like kind of soldiering through, dragging myself through, had one camera in my hand. Nothing's really happening at first. I'm like, all right. So I start calling it out, and, I think early days we used to call things out even more, but like over time we learned to be more respectful. If you're talking to a grandma that passed away, you're not going to be yelling. You're not going to be calling them out. But if it's something that's hurting people and scaring people, I'm going to stand up to it.
Just like a normal person.
Right. It's like, all right, you're a bully. I'm going to stand up against you. So I started calling this thing out and like, all right, like you're this tough bully, like do something, like, come on, like really, I was really getting charged up, kind of angry, honestly, like, all right, come on, do something. All of a sudden I'm laying there. Like I said, I have a camera like this on my belly. Something grabs my legs. I start kicking. It drags me backwards, probably a good 3-4 feet. I drop the camera. I get dragged back away from the camera. You can see me getting dragged away. You can see there's nothing behind me grabbing me or pulling me. And I just lost it. I freaked out. It was like kind of like I've been kind of touched. I've been scratched before. I've seen things lift off the ground and go flying. I've witnessed exorcisms. I've witnessed possessions. But that, to have something that's not there, like physically grab you and move you, like just freaked me out. It just, kind of like what we were talking about, like your brain makes sense in this world. That didn't make any sense and it fried my brain and I freaked out. And on top of it, I'm in a crawl space, so I can't just get up and run. Like I'm literally, it's like that big. Like I'm on my belly crawling through. I couldn't just run. I freaked out, screamed, I was kicking, like I had no idea what was going on. And then all I remember is that all of a sudden I saw Aaron yell for me and he was over in the hole that I climbed in and I could see his light like way off in the distance, and then right away I was like, is there any way like someone could have done that? And there's no. And then when I saw the footage, I was like, all right, yeah, like absolutely not, So I think that's one that still always sticks to me, is like just fries my brain and it's terrifying, especially when you think something can physically move you,
Do you guys have any procedures set in place for when any situation like this comes into fruition, like an apparition that grabs you or somebody gets hurt because a spiritual entity threw a rock at them or anything like that?
Just try to capture it on camera.
Touche.
I mean, obviously, of course, like, we have a production manager who, works for the show. And when we do the investigations, like he's like outside in the parking lot somewhere and like also kind of doubling as security to make sure no one tries to like get in and bother us, things like that. So like worst case, if something did terribly happen, we could call for help to then relay the call for help.
Yeah, I could understand being down in there was one episode I watched where you guys were in like some sort of canyon and you're crawling down. There's like this old wooden ladder you guys were crawling down. I was like, oh, if that one if that breaks, you're like stuck.
Oh, yeah, there's times we've been in old mines and then we're like, all right, we should, like the person that was showing us was like, oh shit, we should get out of here. We got to go. And we're like, why? What's going on? There's old blasting caps still that weren't charged off. Like, they probably sat there for 100 years, but there's still technically active blasting caps. And if one of them just happened to go off when we're down there, like we would have been done.
That's insane.
Yeah, like, there's been many times where like, I remember one time, it wasn't with the shows, we did this spinoff called Netherworld and we went to Paris and we went down into the catacombs under Paris and like not the museum, the catacombs, like there's still 300 plus miles of tunnels under Paris. And we met these two guys on the street that were like, yeah, we know the tunnels, kind of shady characters. They were nice. I'm not talking trash, but, we're just kind of like, all right, we don't know these guys and barely speak English. And they're like, follow us and flip open a sewer grate and like climb down. And like, we're like, okay. And we're just hiking through these like hundreds of miles of tunnels, like wading through water at times and all this stuff, just twists and turns. And any moment, like if those guys were just like, all right, we're out. It's pitch black. Like it was a maze. Like they could have left us there and we would have been done. We would have been stuck down there for who knows. There was no way we would have been able to find our way out. Thankfully, they ended up being cool and like never ditched us. But to top that story off at the end, one of the craziest places, and this probably goes into one of the craziest places I've ever been, is there was a T-junction and the guy's like, just climb in there. There's a little hole in the wall. And then you go in the hole and he's like, we're about 300 feet under Paris. And it opens up to a cave, and it's just filled with human bones. Like, and there's no floor. Like, you're just walking through, crunching through human bones. And basically, it was a mass grave during the plague times. Like, they just dug a giant pit and just threw all the dead bodies in there from the plague and just covered it up and then built the city on top. And so we like found the cave like underground. That's the most surreal place I've ever been.
Yeah, that would freak me out. I still, when I drive by cemeteries, those still freak me out a little bit, just because death it's so uncertain. We have no idea what happens afterwards. It's all experiences. I mean, there are some people who experience near-death situations where they die for 2 minutes, and a lot of those stories are actually very similar with them too, where they say they feel like they see themselves like floating over their body, or they're like kind of gliding through different moments in their life.
Kind of leads into the idea of that's your consciousness kind of separating from your body, and you're still could be self-aware of that experience.
Yeah, that's strange. So tell me a little bit about Simple Equations Media.
Yeah, I mean, so I've worked in production my whole life. It's something, basically almost right out of high school. Since like 2002, I started working in production. Even as an early kid, I played music and I started making music videos for the little bands I would play in. I always felt the need to create, and as I started going, and when I first started getting into the business and trying to like work more, I found it tough. There was a lot of like, the production companies, the rental houses, things like that. They were tough to work with. They were just kind of like, oh, unless you have all this money and you have all this and like, that's it. Like, don't even talk to us if, and I kind of like held on to that. And as my career built up and I became more successful and, thankfully the show has helped a lot and has kept me going, I kind of wanted to create a production company that was the production company that I wish existed when I was first starting. I wanted to create a place that people can come and create, like I can work with different budgets, and like I said, thankfully I have, a regular gig so like I'm not worrying how to pay the bills, so I don't have to be like, oh, it's only this amount of money. Like, let's work it out. Like if you want to do a project, if you want to do a music video, commercial, whatever it is, we're flexible. And, and I think from doing this so long, I've put together great crew members and professional people that are like-minded too, and that just love to create. So I created Simple Equations kind of as a umbrella for people to come in and create. And, since becoming to Vegas with it, we've set up a spot. We have a full recording studio now, post-production studio. We have plenty of equipment rental, like cameras and lighting, grip truck, things like that, even sound packages. And then we have another space that's just for photography, like backdrops, and then also studio set building. If you're doing a film or a commercial, like we've done a commercial where we made an abandoned warehouse. We've built a spaceship in there. We've kind of created all different kind of things. And, I just have a great team that, are all passionate, creative people that just, we love doing it. And, obviously the goal is to make money as a business. But like I said, we're willing to work with people on whatever kind of budget you have. And if it's something cool and exciting, let's do it, and then with that, when we're not bringing in outside business, we kind of work on our own things. Like let's make our own fun short film or kind of our own project, or, we're all musicians still, like a lot of the groups. So we'll shoot videos for each other and things like that. And it's just kind of a creative, supportive environment.
Yeah, without a doubt, the creative economy is where society is headed. The traditional 9 to 5, 40-hour work week model is just becoming so disintegrated from reality. With you see the rise of video production, content creators, like just different creative endeavors, entrepreneurs. Yeah. It's important to have these production studios because I do believe content production studios, video production future studios are needed. They're required. There's so many people who have untapped creative potential, right? Like I started this podcast a year ago. I had no idea how to go about anything. Yeah. And so if there was a service that could have assisted me, I could have sped this along. Or for some people who want to be creative and they want that to be their future, but they're working now. Right. It's easy to have somebody like you come in and help assist with that process and fast track it. Whereas like me, I was out of a job, so I kind of had all the time to figure it out. Right, but that's not the same case for everybody.
Right, yeah, and I think that's one thing which we were planning to do, which we still will, but because of the pandemic, we kind of put it on hold. But we wanted to do workshops and kind of, which not necessarily formal workshops, but even now, like, we'll work with people and, for example, this one buddy who's become a friend of mine, a great camera guy, he saw I had this like special type of tripod. It's called a geared head. It's, it's kind of like a different style. And he was like, oh my God, you have one of those. Like I've always wanted to like learn how to use it, 'cause it's a totally different skill set, how to use it. And I was like, well, yeah, just come in sometime and just practice with it. Like it's here, like, hit me up. There's usually somebody here. Like if I'm not, like, there's somebody usually here that can let you in and go ahead, just go practice with it. And I love that. I love just being like, yeah, like you want to learn that, yeah, I know it's not easy to get access to some of this stuff, but like do it, come on in. And I think that's one of the happiest things. And I think I felt like, I don't know, not complete, but I remember there was a moment where I started like bringing more people in and people have access to the studio now. And I remember it was one of the first days, it was like a Saturday morning and I saw the camera go off and I'm like laying in bed. I'm like, what? Why is the camera off? It's like nothing's going on today. And I look and it's a friend of mine just like shooting, I think it was like an audition tape for somebody. Like, and I was just like, yeah, like it felt like, yeah, like this is what I wanted that to be. This is what I wanted to create the space just for people to come and use and be able to, create content to, pursue, whether it's a personal project or corporate stuff, whatever it is, just having a place that you can go. And too, like, we work in a creative industry and I feel a lot of sets, a lot of businesses are very strict. They're hard to work with. They make it not fun, and I think if you're doing something creative, it should be fun. I think it's going to be a better product at the end if you have fun doing it.
The corporate structure really diminishes creativity. Oh, yeah. It really boxes you in. And the internet has pretty much opened up Pandora's box to all these immense amounts of opportunities. Just sometimes you don't know which direction to go and you need a mentor. And it sounds like you've taken a little bit of a mentorship on as well with some of these workshops you want to host.
It's like I like to try to give back. Like I still remember back, like I said, when I was first starting and how I was kind of like, all right. And even you were saying with the podcast, it's like I'm on my own, like trying to figure this out. And it's like, and I remember reaching out to like, I found people in the, working professionals. I would reach out to them and they're kind of like, no, like I'm a sound guy. Like don't become a sound guy. Like I do that, like, And it was like, oh, there's plenty of work for everybody, you know, especially Vegas. It's such a creative town. There's so many talented people. There's so much need for content, whether it is just commercials or businesses or anything. Like even when, you know, the casinos are having all their conferences and things, like even just that needs content, you know, like there's always a need for it. So there's, you know, we're close enough to LA where you can hop over there easily. You know, people come over here from LA all the time. Like there's no, I don't know, there's no need to compete. You know, I feel there's enough where we can all work together and kind of share in it all.
Exactly. The past economy, the brick and mortar economy was built off of territorial and primal instincts, right? You're all fighting for resources of monetary gain.
Yeah.
And in the internet economy, you're fighting for attention.
Right.
And so I truly believe that collaboration brings attention to everybody. If you have two individuals who already command an audience and you bring them together,
Right.
it's going to mold their audience and then both get to share. Yeah. You know, like there's an infinite amount of subscriptions to a channel.
Right. I think one of the things that kind of inspired me on another level too is when I lived in Nashville. You know, obviously Nashville is known for the music scene, and I tapped into that, you know, and made amazing friends, still friends, and so many talented people. You know, I thought I was a decent musician. I moved to Nashville. I was like, I don't even want to play. Like, it's intimidating, you know, but it makes you become a better musician. But the thing I really fell in love with is that everybody supports one another. Like when I grew up near Philadelphia, you know, and I love Philadelphia, but the band scene, at least when I was growing up there, was very competitive. You know, it's like, hey, my band's playing a show. Oh, well, like, wow, well, I don't know. Like, you know, like no one wants to come out. No one wants to support each other, you know, kind of thing. But then when I got to Nashville, like everybody loves everybody's band. Everyone's playing in everyone's band, you know, not even like full members. They'd be like, hey, our drummer can't make it. And like drummer in another band's like, oh, I'll hop in and play with you guys. Or, you know, and it was such a amazing, inspirational community of musicians that are all incredible, but like they just supported each other, even on little bits or big bits. You know, we started shooting tons of music videos, and you know, it's kind of funny if you go, like, you can probably watch like, you know, my Nashville years, if you will, and all the music videos I shot. You start noticing the same people all the time, and like they're all different bands, but they're like the same people. They're like, yeah, I'll help out with that. I'll do that. I'll jump in there and do this, and you know, it's such a creative, inspirational community. You know, when I got here, like, wanted to keep that kind of that mentality and that vibe.
Yeah, you want to keep that integrity intact. Vegas does display a lot of that camaraderie. I think the best way to embellish that or to display it is Vegas strong, right? Were you were here? Were you here when that happened? That
no,
incident?
it was like I came just after that. Yeah.
Okay, so Vegas, I felt like Vegas, there was always a sense of community, but that unfortunate event really banded everyone together. Right. And now, even just down in this area, if you're down here a lot, you realize that there's a lot of companionship, a lot of creativity, a lot of collaboration. And you realize that the more you help each other, the more friends that you take on, the more, I call it social equity, that you invest in somebody, it'll all return back to you at some point.
Absolutely.
You just don't have, as long as you don't have this like nickel and diming mindset where you want to go in and just try to just wring out every penny from that person,
right, exactly.
And know that if you socially invest in someone and build a friendship, something will return later down the road, whether it's an investment or a friendship or some sort of opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all going to pay off in the long run. And I think it's creating those relationships, you know, and I think I've gotten success by working with people that you enjoy working with, and you know, and it just makes a better product. It makes it, like I said, it makes it fun. The end product will be better if you're working with people, you know, that you can also call friends and enjoy the time doing it. You know, like we're not just stuck in an office working, and that's no knock on people that do that. And if you love it, good for you. You know, not for me, but that's fine. Like, you know, like we're lucky. Like we play for a living. You know, we create things. We're just like playing around. Like it's a dream job, you know, and it's like, it should be enjoyed. It should be fun.
It is true freedom. And when I first started this podcast, I almost felt guilty at times because I was working at a nightclub before this for a long time. And I was so used to working 30, 40 hours of just regular mandated time. Mm-hmm. But when you're creative, you're never on the clock, but you're never off the clock. Oh, so some days you have only 2 hours of work, and then some days you have 10 hours of work. And when I was doing those like days of 2 hours of work, I was like, wow, I feel like I should be doing something.
Yeah, you kind of get guilty almost.
You feel guilty, yeah, because you've just been like indoctrinated to do that by society. But then the days that you work 10 hours, it doesn't ever feel like work.
Right.
But then at the end of the day, you're like, wow, I just knocked out everything for this.
Exactly.
That's the special presentation of this the endeavors.
And I think that's the hardest part. I think it does take a certain type of person to be in this world, in the production world, and I don't know if it's a mix of a little bit of crazy, but it's we're all unique people, and I think you do have to have a mentality, and it's difficult to have personal life. It's because it is like you're always on. You could get a call and be like, oh, I got to go do this. Suddenly it just popped up last minute or things like that. But I think like as I've done it longer and now like getting older too, I guess like in retrospect, I look back and I see like there is a level, and I think a lot of people in the creative industry kind of do sacrifice their own physical and mental health too, like not to like go on a down depressing note, but there's a lot of people that, cut out early, because it is stressful, and I think, people don't realize sometimes, they look at like Hollywood and filmmaking and even music and be like, oh, it's so fun and glamorous. And it's like, no, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of worry, and like, you're always, like worried about, there's people's perception, what they think of you. Like some people like that messes with the mind. And, unfortunately I've had friends and people that, couldn't, I guess, handle it. And, unfortunately took their own lives or went down dark paths. And I think as a community too, that's the importance of being there for each other and understanding that, we might be all like, yeah, like we're doing this and this is fun, but like make sure, like especially these days with the pandemic, like check in with each other, make sure everyone's okay, and understand like sometimes people might be going through things, and try to just be responsive to that and understandable.
And another aspect of the creative economy, if you're a part of it, is not only the community of the creatives themselves, but the audience and the community that supports you, the fanhood. I know you have a ton of fans.
Oh, yeah.
That when I've scrolled through your Instagram and your Twitter and stuff before this, and they're constantly reaching out to you and showing support. And I know like that can be overwhelming or underwhelming at a time too, because you become so infatuated with it or used to it that.
And I love it because it does become like, it's an extension of the family. Our fan base is amazing. And I always say, like, if it wasn't for our fans, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. We want to be successful in the television, successful idea of ratings and things like that if it wasn't for the fans, but like the fans keep us going, and, I love them, and thankfully they're amazing. They're diehard people, and I do feel bad and like get messages every day, and I try to look, it's like, it's hard to respond to everybody, and it's like kind of one of those things. Once I start, it's like I feel like I have to respond to everybody. So it's like sometimes I just can't. And like, I'm sorry, like if you're watching like, and you message me like, and I don't respond, like I still appreciate it, but like it's just tough. Like, literally hundreds a day, like messages and things like that. And now there's all these fakes coming out. Like I get messages from people like, oh, I sent you all these gift cards, and I'm like, no, you didn't. Like we were talking on WhatsApp or whatever, and it's like, I don't even have WhatsApp. Like, what are you doing? Like, don't send people money. Like, even if they say they're me or Zach or anybody, and it's just like, I guess that's the whole new social media environment. It's just like, oh, I'm still kind of navigating. Like part of me still kind of like
resistance,
but like it's also great. It's great, obviously, for promotion and getting things out there, and I love that. But at the same time, it's it can be invasive too. And
so social media, you have to have this balance. We all get that text message on Sunday from Apple saying your screen time was 5 hours to 6 hours, and depending on what you're doing, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? So since I've started the podcast, mine's gone up, but now I have to kind of counteract that by saying, okay, maybe I have 7 hours of screen time, but 4 or 5 hours of that was me actually like promoting and marketing and responding. You're actually working on it, right? Yeah, rather than using it. But it does become strainful at times because you feel like you're missing out in the real world at a time, even though that everybody's kind of gravitating more towards this digital age or this digital identity.
Right. Yeah. It's just, I think it's like anything, it's balance, trying to find the balance and not losing touch with reality. And that's why I kind of went off the tangent there a little bit, but like making sure your own physical and mental health stays intact. Like don't let, your we can all be obsessed with social media and things like that, but like, don't let it overtake it. Like, still be aware of like how you're really feeling and what's going on. And, and honestly, I've been guilty of it. There's times I'm working, and it's 8:00 at night, and all of a sudden I'm like, I haven't eaten today. Like, whoa, like what? Like, and like, that's not good. Like, and I'm guilty of it. And, like I said, as I'm getting older and more aware of it, I try to, be like, all right, now I need to take care of myself. Like, I want to be doing this a long time. And it is a physically, mentally draining job at times. Like, the whole production world is, so we need to keep healthy and keep clear-minded as much as possible.
Yeah. One of the common, I wouldn't say complaints, but one of the common issues I see between comedians and musicians and people in the production world is like how straining traveling is on your body, right? The jet lag, or being in a hotel room 25% of your day or 25% of your life, and not being able to eat an adequate, healthy meal because you're in and out and so fast. Do you have anything set up in your life that helps you maintain a healthy diet or work balance life?
I mean, probably not as much as I would like to. I've been vegan for a long time now. So I try to, but like, I'm 50% on the road. Like, literally every other week I'm on the road. In a weird way, the pandemic has helped because we don't go to restaurants. We don't, stop at like, we don't, like, now, like, and two, we haven't been flying really either. So we drive out. So when I drive out now, I bring a cooler, I bring a camping stove, I bring, things so I can make my own meals. And, and because I have to do all that, I tend to like not eat as big meals as, it's easy when you're on the road and you can be like, oh, let's go to that restaurant. Oh, what do you want to do now? Oh, let's go get food. It's just something to do, kind of normally. So you tend to eat more, you eat bigger meals, things like that. So I think kind of now kind of being more, self-sufficient, and like kind of being like, all right, what can I bring and what can I live in my hotel room and survive just off of that? I think in a weird way, it's kind of made me be able to eat a little healthier and eat a little better, and I would like to hopefully keep that going once things are fully open again and, normal comes back.
Almost there. We're almost there, baby.
Still hopefully keep kind of doing that,
How long have you been practicing veganism for?
I've been vegetarian for, honestly, maybe like 2004, 2005-ish, somewhere around there. And then like more strict vegan, like I kind of like went in and out. Like the only thing is like, honestly, cheese is like the hardest part. I mean, who doesn't love a good piece of pizza?
Yeah.
So that was always the hardest. And other than that, and there was like a brief time where like I still eat fish occasionally, like not often, but occasionally I would eat fish. So I guess pescatarian technically. But probably the last 2 years-ish, I've been, I would say 99%, strict vegan, I'll admit there's an occasional slice of pizza that slips in once in a while, but
That's
even
okay.
that, even that I try to, and now too, like honestly, the more you do it, like it affects my body differently. Like, I was never lactose intolerant or anything, but now because I cut out dairy and cut out cheese and milk, if I ever do get a little bit in me, it's like, oh yeah, like,
yeah, you
like,
feel it.
I think
you
I've created a lactose intolerance, but then, if I do, I'm like, oh, and sometimes, you are on the road and you're like, oh, there's absolutely nothing. All right, I'm just going to grab a piece of pizza just so I can have something. But then I have enzymes and I'll take an enzyme and, it breaks it down.
That's good. Yeah. Sometimes the breaks are good. I don't think it's good to say 100% in anything that you do. There needs to be some yin to the yang to kind of replenish the body or the soul.
Yeah. And too, like, in a selfish way, you got to live. You got to enjoy yourself sometimes too. And, like I said, pizza's delicious. So, like every once in a while, it's like, you know what? I'm going to eat this because it's amazing.
I love it. I have one final question for you before we get out of here. What does Las Vegas mean to you?
I'm still learning because I'm still new to Las Vegas, but I think what I've discovered so far is that, like, we kind of touched on it. Like, it is an actually amazing town. And I think it's funny because, like, when I started first living here and I would fly home from a shoot, you're on the plane, everyone's partying, everyone's like, we're going to Vegas, and I'm just like, I'm going home. And people will be like, hey, where are you staying? What are you doing? I'm like, I'm just going home. They're like, you live here? And I'm like, yeah, like, and then, and like, I feel like, I don't know, like and I guess I was the same way at first. Like, honestly, I didn't like Vegas. The first time I came here, I was like, because I only knew the Strip. I knew like casinos and party and craziness. And it's like, all right, that's not really my scene. Like, you know, and I think people think that's what Vegas is. And like now living here and being here, I'm realizing like there's so much more to it. Like that's honestly such a small part to what Vegas is. It's the biggest spotlight part, but there's so much more to it. There's so many good people. There's so many creative people. You know, there's so much beautiful landscape, things like that. You're close to all these cool, like, you know, historic towns. You're close to other cities. Like it's just such a cool, good place to live. And, you know, and I'm, you know, I'm happy to call it home right now.
Beautiful. It's the land of opportunity,
Absolutely.
as most like to say.
And then it's nice, you know, there is 24-hour entertainment. So if you're bored at 3 a.m., you can go do something.
You really can't beat it. You really can't beat it. I had so many friends growing up. I was born and raised out here.
Okay.
Who moved away and tried to go to college somewhere else. And everyone, 95%, all come back. Yeah, you just see. I mean, it's one of the fastest growing cities in the nation over the last few years. Yeah. Everyone sees opportunity. It used to be like Florida, used to be a retirement destination, but now it's just the actual destination to live.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And the weather is, honestly, it's great. Like, you know, there's a few months it gets really hot, but like it doesn't bother me. You know, like it's like, all right, those are the months you're not going to go hiking at Red Rock when it's 120 out, but like, you know, there's still plenty of other things to do. We all have air conditioning. I got a pool. I'm all right. It's all right. And it's dry. It's, you know, I came from Nashville where like, it was a good example of like when I first moved to Vegas, I left Nashville. I think it was about like 80 degrees. Disgusting. It was so hot. Like it just felt really hot. It was only 80, but it felt like you just walk outside, you're just dripping wet. There's so much humidity. You're soaking, you know, you always feel like you just got out of the shower. Drive, you know, I stopped in Albuquerque for the night, got to Vegas. It was like 110. And I was like, oh, this feels so much better. You know,
that dry heat.
Oh yeah. So I can definitely tolerate that way better.
Pool season for the win. We're almost there.
Right.
Where do I send all the listeners and viewers to learn more about you, get involved in Simple Equations, social media, anything like that?
So I'm mostly on Twitter. I'm just Jay Wasley, Jaywasley. On Instagram, Jay Wasley Film. And then Facebook, Jay Wasley Film. And then Simple Equations is Simple Equations pretty much everywhere. Or Simple Equations Media, I think.
Yeah. Like that. Go watch Ghost Adventures if you haven't watched it yet.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing show. Jay, thank you for coming on.
Awesome.
I appreciate
Thanks
it. You're a very genuine human. Enjoyed the show. I'll have to keep watching and seeing what kind of ridiculous stuff you guys are up to next.
We're still going, and it still gets crazier and crazier every time.
Beautiful. And I wish nothing but the best with Simple Equations. You're going to absolutely crush it. It's something that Vegas is needed. And yeah, I know you'll find a lot of success with it.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
No problem. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you next time.